Thank you for and thank you everyone for showing up here today in person and making the trip. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. We are being joined via Zoom with a bunch of folks from around New York City, and we are here being joined by a bunch of people who are passionate about the community. So I am Briana Carbajal. I am the state legislative manager with We Act for Environmental Justice. And tonight we're here to talk about Con Ed bill hikes and fossil fuels and how the investor-owned utility model and industry has been, unfortunately, been taking advantage of our communities for far too long. We Act for Environmental Justice is a 35-year-old community-based organization with a membership predominantly in Harlem. And we fight to make sure that our communities, which are predominantly low-income communities and communities of color, have agency in making sure that we are helping build programs and in conjunction with our community and informing them of everything they need to know and making sure they have a seat at the table when it comes to the creation of sound, fair environmental health policies and practices. So We Act really cares about this issue, especially because when I first personally began working at We Act, one of my first assignments as an intern was to do wellness checks on the community and ask them, hey, how high is your bill? We want to know how you're doing in this crazy pandemic world. How are you surviving, frankly? And a lot of folks were telling me that they were seeing bills in the thousands, like $2,000, $3,000. And Con Ed is the primary provider for Northern Manhattan. So we are here today to talk about Con Ed's injustices in our community and ways that we are able to fight at the state level and other ways in our communities to make sure we are advocating for folks first and foremost. So I will now pass it along to a member of We Act to share her story on utility debt and everything else having to do with Con Ed. Let's hear it for Ruth Mamdani.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me here. I'm a Harlem resident. My name is Ruth McDaniels. I've been in Harlem for almost 60 years. And I'd like to speak to this narrative of Con Ed and the injustice that they're constantly raising the prices and what they know are challenging communities as far as economic stature. But my primary focus for today is that they had offered a program during COVID. It was like a debt relief to help to alleviate some of the loss that people had encountered financially in COVID. And as you know, this country got $1 trillion money drop. $1 trillion for 50 states. That's a lot of money. $1 trillion broken up to give out to multi-million-dollar corporations. I'm quite sure Con Ed profited from it. I'm quite sure they walked away with a lot of money off of that table to turn around and give out a fraction of a payment. They offered debt relief. And in my mind, when you say debt relief, I think like you're going to make this debt disappear. I don't think you're going to give me, if the bill is 1,000, I'm thinking 1,000 is going away. I don't think that it's 1,000 and you're going to give me $100. That's not debt relief for me. Yeah. Well, I won't say that my bill was 1,000, but it was a substantial amount, and they gave me $299, and I'm like, that's disrespectful, especially since I had to do a down payment with Con Edison when I signed up, and my down payment was $199, and that was about 25 years ago. So now let's do the math. $199 25 years ago sitting in the bank would be about $100 more in interest. So you just gave me my money back. You gave me, there's no debt relief. And if I'm who I am and I'm out and involved in finding out information about Con Edison and disenfranchisement, I'm one of the lucky ones because there's a plethora of people who don't even have that mindset to even consider that and just go along. And finances aren't getting bigger. I mean, you see right now on the news that they say the average income to be able to sustain itself is $134,000 in New York. Not in Harlem. Not in Harlem. The median income is like $45,000. That's the median income. I mean, even when they say 100, that's two people. But when you're talking about Con Edison and they're charging these rates, that's almost like rape. When you have a president who makes $9 million. So I'm just interested to hear what WEAC is saying and what's the response to a multi-million-dollar conglomerate, a monopoly that's willfully and intentionally taking disenfranchised people and raping them over and over again and getting bonus money for doing it. I just want to hear what that conversation is like.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Ruth, for sharing. I think it's really important that we hear from community members first and foremost who are unfortunately experiencing utility debt, as like I think almost all of people who live in Northern Manhattan are right now. And here at WEACT, we really care about like how not only the debt and the mental strain that it puts on folks in our communities to have to look at that number and what they're going to do about it. And utility debt is the second largest bill that people are paying after rent. And people who are living in New York City have higher energy burdens than a lot of people in the rest of the United States. Like that is insane. And we need to be paying attention to this issue because Con Ed is just continuing to invest in fossil fuel infrastructure, continuing to harp us with these stranded assets that are continuing to pollute our planet and harm people's health. So now I'm going to actually turn it over to our next speaker, which is next slide. Our state legislator and assembly member, Zohran Mamdani.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Both to everyone who is in the room and everyone who is at home. It is a pleasure to be with you tonight from this cold place that is Albany during budget negotiations. I'm here because this is of immense concern to myself, to my district. And the reason for that is, you know, kind of to what the previous speaker was saying, just how top of mind Con Ed bills are in terms of what people have to pay every single month and what is putting them on the edge of being priced out of the neighborhood and the place that they call home. You know, in my office where I represent Astoria, parts of Astoria and Long Island City, about 1/4 of all of our constituent cases have to do with Con Ed. And that is with the existing rate structure. Now, every few years, the state enters into a rate case with Con Ed. The last one was in 2019. There's one going on currently. And this time I joined the rate case as a party to that case because of the impact that it has on my constituents. And what I've seen through the course of that case is just how time and again the state allows Con Ed to trample over the rights of our constituents. And it tramples over them in that we time and again are simply a rubber stamp for Con Ed's requests to line the pockets of their CEOs even more than they do currently today, all at the expense of working class New Yorkers who have no way in hell of being able to pay the bills right now. Forget about even the bills tomorrow. And so, you know, I'm here to talk about this importance that Con Ed plays in the lives of Astorians and residents of LIC, but also to speak about how this entire system that we have of a private monopoly over our energy system, over a basic good such as energy that people require to live in New York State, is one that we have to dismantle. Because in the way that it functions today, we are just allowing more and more New Yorkers to be pushed out of their homes because of for the sake of profit. So I really do appreciate everyone who does such fantastic work here, work that has both educated me and my office as to the importance of this, and also to so many of my constituents, because in addition to this town hall, we have called over 30,000 houses across our district to let them know to submit a public comment. We have also held our own public hearing on the rate case after the state refused to grant us an additional public hearing where we had more than 60 attendees. We have rallied dozens of my colleagues to sign on to a letter making clear their opposition. And today we continue to urge the Public Service Commission to reject this joint agreement because it is one that we know is only going to exacerbate the problem that requires more than $1 billion in utility relief today. So with that said, standing in solidarity with all of you, and really in this for the long fight of dismantling Con Ed and finally bringing public power to New York State so that people can afford their basic human right of energy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zohran, for being here and sharing that with us today. We really appreciate your advocacy for folks in your constituency in New York State. And I believe you're absolutely right in that energy is a human right. It is a basic need that people need to use every day to survive. And so now we're going to hear from an amazing advocate, Lori Wheelock from the Public Utility Law Project, who deals with these cases first and foremost, helping people advocate against, get their bills down that are obscene right now, and has been working to fight these utility companies firsthand. So Lori Wheelock.
Thank you so much, Briana. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. My name is Lori Wheelock. I go by she, hers pronouns, and I'm the executive director of the Public Utility Law Project. We go by PULP for short. Our organization operates in two fields. The first is direct services. So just like legal aid, we help low-income individuals when they're at risk for shutoff. When Con Edison says, oh, you owe this much money, we help get them into financial assistance programs, into energy efficiency programs to help them take control of their bill, and to try and help empower them, because there is nothing scarier than getting that termination notice in the mail and not knowing when they're coming to potentially shut you off. We learn from those experiences and we put them in the rate cases. Just like the assembly member, just like we act and our friends at Agree, we are parties in rate cases, and we use what we learn on the ground to fight for more consumer protections and try to lower the rates. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what these rate cases are and why they're important. So as the assembly member mentioned, that regulated utilities are monopolies. They have the right to operate as a monopoly and not have competition necessarily, but they have to follow certain rules. And so they have tariffs that they have to follow. They have to follow regulations. But when they want to increase the rates on us, they have to file a case. These cases usually last for about 11 months. And what happens is through that process, people can enter as a party. People can ask questions, you can challenge, you can push for proposals. And the hope is at the end, there will be what's called a joint proposal. A joint proposal is essentially a deal. And that deal goes before the Public Service Commission here in New York State. The Public Service Commission is made of 7 members. Those members are appointed by the governor and they're confirmed by the New York State Senate. And so they sit there and this joint proposal gets worked on, and then it comes before them and they have to vote. They can vote yes, they can vote no, or they can modify it. And so that's just a little bit about what happens in the rate case. Why are these rate cases important? Because it opens up the company. This is the one time we have transparency. You can ask them questions in writing. You can ask them verbal questions. They have to respond to you within a certain amount of time. We as parties, we write briefs. We fight to prevent terminations in the hot summer. We did an amazing study on heat islands. We all fought to protect New York City residents in the hot summer from having service shut off, because what are they going to do? What are you going to do if your power is shut off in the summer? How do you protect yourself? So we fight for these different, actions, these different environmental goals, preventing infrastructure to fossil fuels. We can fight for these different actions in the rate case to try to hold them accountable. But a lot of this happens confidentially. We can't talk about what happens in that room as a party. So we rely on the public to help us. We need your words. We need your stories to get into the record, because the judges read them. The commissioners read them. When we get in these rooms, we hear the judges say, we saw how many comments there are. We saw this. And so that is important. You can help us build the evidence we need to do the policy and the changes that we all know need to happen. And it is a battle. Andrew, who's here with me tonight, we actually cross-examined Con Edison yesterday in Albany, and there were a lot of students in that room. But we did it. We were joined by other advocates, including AARP of New York and some individual interveners, but it is hard work. And at the end of the day, we will not be successful without your stories. So there is still time. We imagine, again, there is a joint proposal right now. We need to put more stories and more action in that record because it will go to the commission probably in the next month or two. And that's extremely, extremely important. So when you get that bill in the mail, remember how important you are in this whole process, and you submit a comment, you share your story because it will help make this whole process better and help us advocate on your behalf. So thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Lori, for giving us that great rundown of how you can help advocate. I think it's important that we talk tonight about not only all the work that we do as community leaders and community members, but all the ways that the people who are on the ground and experiencing this firsthand can help us advocate for debt relief and change in our utility systems. So next is an amazing, another advocate of New Providence, of the Alliance for a Green Economy, the Deputy Director, who has been working in the energy space and on energy products and projects and been an advocate against utilities and more for and towards the goal of energy democracy for a long time. So let's welcome Avni.
And sit and talk to y'all. I feel so much more natural having a conversation like this. And I really want to thank Lori for giving that wonderful kind of overview of what a rate case is. And I just want to bring a little bit of a different perspective to rate cases because I'm extremely new to rate cases. So I feel like I can give a little bit of the beginner's understanding of rate cases and also just emphasize that, as Lori is saying, there's a lot that goes on in there. They're really hard and they purposefully make them hard. They purposefully make it so that you don't know what's going on. You can't just jump into a rate case and find all the information at your fingertips. You have to ask XYZ person. You have to file information requests. You have to do all of these very weird, not common sense processes in order to get any ounce of information from the company. And it is so frustrating. So this whole process, I think, is something that we need to figure out how to make better. And unfortunately, because we're always, having to be in these processes to stop the bad things, that process is going to take a little bit longer. But I'm really heartened by the amount of people I've seen come in with so much energy, the amount of organizations I've seen come in with so much energy into these rate cases, because the more power we build to fundamentally change the way that decisions are made by our regulators and the way laws are enforced by our utilities. Because unfortunately, what we're seeing is that the utilities just aren't interested in implementing the climate law or environmental justice mandates. So let me back up a little bit and just say a little bit about why Alliance for a Green, I just told you about how terrible this process is. So let me tell you a little bit about why Alliance for a Green Economy intervenes in these processes, because I do also think that there have been some really exciting ways that we have won, and I do want to share those. So we're a 10-year-old nonprofit. We're headquartered in Syracuse, New York, but we intervene in rate cases and policy proceedings across the state. And that's because we believe that as advocates that we need to be in those rooms fighting on behalf of ourselves, our neighbors, our communities, and that we deserve a seat at the table. And ultimately we want to change the whole table itself. We want to change the whole room itself. But for now, there should be nothing about us without us. We're in rate cases because, we've been intervening since 2017, and we're in rate cases because our executive director, Jessica Agile, saw that so much was happening in these rate cases that impacted on the ground projects and on the ground impacts to people's lives, and their interaction with their energy, with the energy system ultimately comes from the energy bill. And utilities have a massive impact, obviously, on our energy bills through the way that they try to recoup infrastructure investments and recoup money for their shareholders. And so when we're in these rate cases, we're trying to hold both the regulators and utilities accountable to various laws, public service mandates, and mandates that they serve their customers equally as they serve shareholders, because unfortunately it's very weighted on one side. And so when we do win in these rooms, it is 100% because groups like ours, like We Act and Sane Energy Project and PULP and AARP, some of the other groups that have been intervening in this Con Ed rate case, it's 100% because we're in that room making those demands and pushing regulators to comply. And as I've said, I'm really heartened by how many individuals have also joined as public commenters, turning up to rallies, taking actions, really showing the Public Service Commission that they have a voice and they're demanding to be heard. So just a couple things that we've won to give some hope to all of this. Alongside some of our allies, all of the upstate gas utilities have now agreed to freeze their gas sales or even decrease their amount of gas sales. And we've also been able to get several utilities to agree to stop marketing gas and gas conversion programs. We've also helped force at least 5 major gas projects to be canceled or delayed. And the most notable, I don't want to steal Kim's thunder, but I'm sure Kim is going to want to share one of the big wins in Brooklyn. Another notable example upstate is the Albany Loop pipeline, which was a 7.3 mile long pipeline, which would have carried fracked gas. So just a lot of infrastructure that we shouldn't be paying for, and we shouldn't be giving money to shareholders for building. So one thing I just want to mention that we can look forward to is that we have some exciting legislation that Jean is going to talk about in a little bit, and I think it's important to recognize the place that legislation has in all of this. We are fighting in all of these individual rate cases, but we do need broader legislation that addresses all of the utilities, because going piecemeal would just take so long. And plus, we just need to update the way that those utilities are regulated, because they haven't been forced to change their regulations since our climate law. And so we really need new laws that will actually get them to do that. And then, of course, I just want to give a special shout out to the Build Public Renewables Act, because we know that ultimately, we can't reform Con Ed. We can't reform an entity that just cares about profit and just cares about their shareholders. So while we are trying to stop the bad in these rate cases and we're playing a lot of defense, we're also trying to play some offense. And the last piece of legislation, and then I'm going to pass the mic back to Briana. The last piece of legislation that I want to shout out is the New York Heat Act. If you haven't heard of that, it is a piece of legislation that would end some outdated public service laws and mandates on the utilities to provide gas. And it actually forces them to provide gas. And so by rolling back that mandate, we'd actually be able to get them to stop building gas infrastructure and then saying it's because they have to and that they're forced to by public law. So we're just trying to repeal some outdated legislation, and it also caps energy burdens at 6%. So it would be a pretty big win for some of these households that we're hearing about getting $1,000 bills, because I'm sure it's not 6% of anyone's, well, very small few percentage of people's income. Anyways, thank you all so much for being here, and take it back from me.
Thank you, Avni, for sharing that with us. I think I share the sentiment of how frustrating rate cases can be. I haven't even been the main person who's been doing the rate case work at WEAC. That's been my wonderful colleague, Caleb. And sometimes I look over their shoulder, reading their emails. I see their inbox full just from the morning of a bunch of requests for information and lawyer speak. And it's a bunch of gobbledygook that I don't understand and have no interest in understanding. But it is hard. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it is hard to intervene in those cases. And so definitely appreciate all the work these advocates do. And that's also why we need to advocate for legislation to make sure we're making those macro changes that Nate was speaking about. So next we'll pass it to our wonderful organizer of the night and amazing director of the Sane Energy Project, Kim Project.
Thank you so much, everybody. So we made like a little, like just to talk, like Lori and Avni really like helped us understand how horrible of a process a rate case is. But one really amazing thing that happened in North Brooklyn when we were fighting the North Brooklyn pipeline is we got probably about 15 to 20 residents who never really engaged in this process before to become interveners and become parties. And then they would attend the meetings with us who kind of had an idea that it was a terrible, horrible process. But what happened to all these local residents that were living on the pipeline route is they came into these meetings and it completely radicalized them because they saw kind of like how the sausage was made in Albany. And they were like, this is terrible. This is how our bills are determined. So we decided, you know, everybody needs to know about this. And so we made a little video. Sane really likes to do like arts and communication stuff. Mike, if you could go to the next slide and play the video, this sort of like helps you understand.
In the 1800s, New York City used to light our streets with gas lanterns. As the population grew, so did the amount of companies looking to corner the market. And since there was no regulation, they actually used to battle for customers and turf in the streets of Manhattan. These were called the gas house gangs. The invention of the incandescent bulb changed everything. Gas and electricity supplies went head-to-head in competition. To make sense of a growing and complex grid, utilities were granted monopoly status in order to streamline energy delivery and to prevent the grid from having dueling companies with double, triple, quadruple infrastructure. What a mess that would be. In exchange for being entrusted with special monopoly status, each utility company operating in every region of New York is regulated. In the majority of New York, they are regulated by the Public Service Commission. And in Rockaway, Queens, and Long Island, they are regulated by the Long Island Power Authority. So for the most part, the Public Service Commission regulates our electricity, gas, water, and telecoms in New York State. This means they are in charge of pricing and how our energy is generated. So the corporate utilities have to ask the PSC when they want to raise the prices on our energy bills or build new infrastructure. This process of asking for more money or development of infrastructure opens up a proceeding which is called a rate case. Right now in New York State, many corporate utilities are asking to expand fossil fuel infrastructure without considering renewable alternatives and make us, the customers, pay for it. Given our climate goals in New York State and climate goals globally to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, this makes no sense. This is big money wanting us to keep business as usual. Visit saneenergy.org/utilities to get active in keeping fossil fuels in the ground.
All right, thanks. We can go to the next slide.
In the 1800s, New York City used to light.
Okay, so yeah, I just want to tell you a little bit about the victory that we did have in North Brooklyn. We had a whole bunch of people sort of just pile into this process, and the national grid attorneys and like some of the more like agreeable, like large organizations, corporations that are typically used to having staff that play ball in these rooms. They're very comfortable. We're totally freaked out that like activists started like coming in waves and asking questions. And it was amazing. And it felt so good because it was like, it was a really horrible place to be But it was like, this is where they make decisions. They're used to keeping the door closed. And now that we're kicking it open and we're getting involved and we're asking questions and we're saying, what is that acronym? What is that acronym? Like, we don't get what you're saying. Can you explain that? You know, they have to. And so it's sort of changing the way that they work, which is what one of our goals is to like open this up to the public. It's the Public Service Commission after all. So we in North Brooklyn, we're fighting this pipeline. You can see here. This is Brownsville going through Bed-Stuy, Bushwick, and then into South Williamsburg, and then all the way up into Greenpoint, East Williamsburg. And they have this massive 110-acre depot there that's like liquefied fracked gas facilities. It stinks, it's gross. They decided, National Grid thought, oh, you know, one way we'll get back to the community is to build little league fields on our facility grounds. Well, if you go there and you look now, it's grass about this tall. The Little League field signs are like crooked and decaying because the ground was so toxic. They couldn't allow kids to play there. So this is the kind of company that we're dealing with. They still think that they're giving back to the community, and it's really horrendous. So we're happy to like go in there and beat these guys up. So we ended up, because of the yellow part of the pipeline, they had built that because they had a rate case in 2016 that they filed, and they got a whole bunch of money to build this pipeline. We didn't know about rate cases in 2016 at Sane Energy Project. We didn't learn about them until 2019. And that's when Agree and Public Utility Law Project, they taught us about it and said, hey, this is going on. So we ended up getting involved. And so this massive part of the pipeline was built, and then they segmented it. So they made it look like it was a whole bunch of little pipelines, but making one big long pipeline. We did direct action. We locked our bodies down to the pipeline right where that big pink dot is. We created comments. We got the elected officials involved at every level of government to make comments, to express rage. We got the media involved. We organized in every way, went to libraries and had, you know, info sessions for the community. And we were able to scare the crap out of National Grid that they withdrew their application for the last phase of the pipeline. And just recently on April 6th, they withdrew their application to build these massive things called liquefied fracked gas vaporizers. At the end, really, that's what it's called, at the end of the pipeline. So because of our action getting involved, we were able to halt projects. And we are only concerned because there's still the other part of the pipeline that is still poisoning people and has gas running through it. So we don't declare it a major victory, but this is a big victory that we stopped what we were involved in. So it just shows you what happens when they work in secret and what happens when we expose them. Next slide. So part of exposing them includes all of you in this room and all of you on the Zoom and all of your friends and family. Please come to a massive rally we're going to have in Union Square on Saturday, April 29th. And we are going to have a rally called Pull the Plug on Con Ed bill hikes and fossil fuels. So you can RSVP if you put that in the chat, folks doing tech. bit.ly/pull the plug on fossil fuels and RSVP for that, and please share it widely. If you are in an organization, we're taking co-sponsors, please come, and we're going to have a massive group of people, and we're going to have a huge banner that says, you know, pull the plug on Con Ed, fossil fuels, and bill hikes. And we're going to have big pennies that say not one penny, lots of good art. I promise there's going to be lots of good art, and I'll send out invitations for an art build. But we're going to take a massive group photo and print out these photos and take a copy to Ruth's favorite person, Tim Colley, the CEO of Con Ed. We're going to send one to Governor Hochul, and we're going to send one to the public service commissioners to let them know, look at all the people you are affecting. So we're going to do every tactic we can. And that's it for me. I'm going to now pass it over to Jean Bergman, who is my esteemed colleague from Sane Energy Project. She is our amazing advisor on policy and sustainability. And she is a longtime AIDS activist and has found her way into the climate movement, and we're never going to let her go. And she's going to tell us a little bit about what we can do, what our future is, and some legislation. Thanks, Jean.
Thank you so much, Kim, and everybody. I'm passing these around to sign up, please. Sign up and then hand it on so that we can contact you. And if you have any questions that you want to stay in touch with us and share your stories, please just scribble a note on there and let us know. And there's also a computer up there. If you prefer to do it online, you can sign up on Audrey's computer. So let's see, can you go to the next?
I was gonna say, can we scoot a little bit more in the middle? There you go.
You do there too. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, great. So the other speakers, Omni, Kim, Ruth, everybody has set up exactly the question. Like, we're focused on Con Ed's rate case because that's what they're doing right now to try and raise your rates. And we need to stop them there. But the rate cases are an unfair playing field. They're built, the whole design of the structure is to ensure that the corporations, the utility corporations continue to make substantial profits. They're guaranteed to a return on equity, typically around 9 or 10%, that is set in the rate cases. It's not exactly the same thing as profit, but that's irrelevant right now. And so they are driven to continue to expand their fossil fuel infrastructure because that is how they increase what is called the rate base on which that percentage rests. So it is a rigged system. And while we must fight in it, as Lori said, there are limits to whether or not we can really win. So we need to do other things. And one thing, some of us find the world of legislation a sort of neoliberal trap, but in fact, that is the context within which rate setting is placed. So we're all working, many people here, on a series of bills which are currently being considered for inclusion in the state budget. You can either pass a bill straight up in the Senate or the Assembly, and then the governor does or doesn't sign it, or the bill or variants of the bill can be included in the budget. And that's what where we're focused now. The budget was supposed to pass or be signed on April 1st. They're very late. That's not new, but it's not good. And they're mainly focused, as you probably know, on bail reform issues and housing. But they're going to be turning shortly, we hear, to fighting out the details of this legislation. And one thing that's interesting is that while the public service law, which is a massive piece of law that defines how not just energy utilities, but water and telecommunications and other utilities are, how those are regulated in our state, that law is constantly being changed by pieces of legislation, which will say, actually, you need to change the law in order to allow this other thing to happen. And so many of the pieces of legislation that are listed here have add a few words or remove a few words from the public utility law. One thing that we're focused on right now that Avni mentioned is the New York HEAT, the Home Energy Affordable Transition Act. And it does two things, as Avni says. It ends gas subsidies for this last 100 feet. And the people who pay those subsidies are the other customers. It basically socializes the expansion of the system by making us pay for it. And the second thing, it caps energy bills at 6%, which is absolutely essential. And we would like you to contact the governor and ideally your state senator and assembly member and say, you make sure this passes because we need this. And if you don't get it passed, we will primary you and throw your ass out of legislature. Another one that Avni also mentioned was the Build Public Renewables Act, which is also called the Public Power Bill. And the really important thing that we have to do is we actually have to eliminate investor-owned utilities. We have to municipalize them or make them owned by the state. And in fact, there are thousands of municipal utilities around the country, because when the big utilities first set up, they only wanted to be in the cities where you could connect a lot of people for relatively cheap because the economies of scale of it. And so FDR and the government went in and set up municipal utilities in all the smaller towns and rural areas. And in New York, we have the biggest public utility in the United States, in the New York Power Authority, which comes out of Niagara. And we produce over a quarter of our electricity with problematic, because it is on indigenous land, but nonetheless renewable hydropower. We at the Public Power New York Coalition are seeking to change the law so that the New York Power Authority is able, and in fact is required, to build and own other renewable energy projects, and also to eliminate its small group of fossil fuel-based power plants. And we have a very good chance of winning much of that bill in the budget. There's also the All Electric Building Act, which would bar any new gas in new construction, not your existing buildings, but in new buildings. And currently the fight is over when that ban would begin in 2024 or 2025, first of the year or later, and how big the buildings. But we have a good chance of a substantial win. And when it passes, even if we don't win on the year, that will begin to motivate contractors and Lowe's and everybody to move towards providing what people need to electrify. The Energy Efficiency, Equity, and Jobs Act, which has been really driven by REACT, is a crucial bill, because what it would do, it would provide the financial support that lower income residents and homeowners need in order to make their homes ready for weatherization and efficiency. Because if you have asbestos and mold and lead in your home, you can't weatherize. You're actually making your home even more dangerous. So we can't just make places efficient, we have to make them safe first. And EJA has not been faring very well in the battle of the budget, but it is really crucial, and we will continue to fight for that legislation. And then a piece of legislation, this is what I really wanted to talk most about, even though it's going on, and somebody should tell me when I'm out of time, is the Utility Thermal Energy Networks and Job Act. And because we need to electrify everything, we need to make all electricity renewable. We need to make all renewable electricity generation and distribution and transmission publicly owned and not for profit. And we need to use less. And one of the best ways to use less is to begin to implement a new, but not actually surprising technology. It's one of those things that you just think, why haven't we been doing this all along, called thermal energy networks. And those are large systems which capture waste heat from buildings or from subways. You know, when you're driving in the winter and you see a big pipe in the orange and white pipe with steam coming out, like, that's heat. Meanwhile, the building right next to it is burning fossil fuels in the cellar in order to create heat. So what these systems do is they take heat from one building and move it to another. And they do that through long, very, very large interconnected loops of water with a little additional non-toxic fluid. And they balance heat and the demand for heat and the demand for cool. And they do that with heat pumps, which you may have heard of. Heat pumps are an incredible technology, much more efficient for heating and cooling your home, so you don't also need a air conditioner. And the heat pumps will either draw heat out of the space, the building, the ice rink, whatever it is, or they reverse that, and they draw heat from outside and into the home to heat it. So, and the idea is you have many, many different sources and sinks and recipients and donors of thermal energy, and it is 5 times more efficient than just using electricity straight up. You still use electricity for the pumps, for the heat pumps, for moving all of that water, but you are not burning fossil fuels in order to create warm air or to power air conditioners, which are highly inefficient and are also typically in a window and vulnerable to damage from weather. Whereas these systems are buried, super safe. They're just astoundingly good. So a bill passed last July, thanks in large part to Agree, Avni's group. And they brought together the utilities and the unions and climate activists to demand that all 7 largest utilities build thermal energy networks in each of their areas, their territories. And one of the things that we're working on at Sane Energy now is to oppose an effort by National Grid to do a fake thermal energy network, which is really just a really crappy little geothermal network, which is not what the idea is. It's nice, but it isn't adequate. And the reason I think they can do that is because they don't think it's going to be in a NYCHA building, and they don't care. They don't think that poor people deserve better. So we're fighting to get a system that is really top-notch, built in a disadvantaged community, but including a lot of different stores, businesses, residences, a NYCHA building, but also schools and hospitals, subways. And it's really exciting. It's going to be kind of a long project, but one of the things that we've been thinking is, if you want to stop gas, you have to make sure that people are confident that they will be warm and safe and cool when they need to be. And so we need to be on top of what the technology is so that we can guarantee that the lives that we want people to be able to lead are possible. So that's basically it.
Q&A. I think we already have a question.
Yeah, we have a couple questions.
Okay.
I have questions.
Amazing. Do we want to, Jean's facilitating the Q&A, but if we need to hop in.
Yeah, I'll facilitate the Q&A, but I will not answer all the questions. For Assemblymember Mamdani and his staff, if he's gone already, given that utility profits go before the DPS for approval, has legislation or regulatory advocacy been considered to cap or reduce the allowable return on equity? Can you just say it? It is given that the return on equity that a investor-owned utility is allowed to recover goes before the Department of Public Service for approval. Has legislation or regulatory advocacy been regulatory advocacy been considered in order to limit that? I believe Lori is all
right up here. Right here next to you. So yes, we actually are working on 3 different bill ideas right now. They haven't been introduced, but we are working on some ideas on how to control the return on equity. So that's, in the legislative realm.
Would you be able to explain what return on equity is?
Of course, yes. So as you had mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily profits, but the utilities make money by building things. And so they are guaranteed this return on equity to help them with their costs and what they, that's kind of how they make their money. And so they're guaranteed this amount and it gets set in the rate case. And so much of it rides on that amount.
Grant money.
No.
What's the, how do they build? It's what money? Where does this move?
Yeah,
it's grant money. Okay, yeah.
Exactly.
They get grant money. They get government grant money to do the building.
They don't
You're this check.
Yeah, we're actually pushing them right now to apply for federal money, which is like a whole other story, because that's been a battle to get them to apply for federal money. And we think the reason they've been slow to do it is because they can't earn a rate of return off of federal money because it's government money, but they can earn a rate of return off of our money.
Right.
So we are looking, and then in the Con Ed rate case, we're also pushing proposals to limit how much ROE they can get this rate on return on equity. So we're trying to be creative again in like the micro and the macro realm. But I saw there was a follow-up question as well.
Yeah, I do totally understand that. Like, who guarantees that they get 9–10%? Like, that's a law.
I can explain
That's a
that.
legal provision.
It helps to contrast it with the idea of publicly owned power. The investor-owned utilities are capitalist businesses, right? They cover all of their costs from an HR department to building pipelines. And in addition to that, they make additional revenue that is their profit, right? And typically what businesses do, they shovel a lot of that back in, and then there's some of it they pay to their investors as dividends, right, to their shareholders. The return on equity is typically around the country between 8 and 10%. It tends to be pretty high in New York. A publicly owned utility doesn't get a return on equity. They file all the money that they make over, and where they make it from, to answer Ruth's question, is from, they send bills to the customers, and the customers pay the bills, and that's where the money comes from. All the money the utilities have comes from you and me. So now how it's guaranteed is that it's day to day, it's kind of messy, but on an accounting basis, overall, they have to seek to keep within a couple of points of that 9% or 8.7%, whatever was agreed in the last rate case. But they don't get grants. I mean, they should. Like, we should have public utilities, and then they wouldn't do this. But
now, when we talk about it's two things that I want to focus on. Co-op City has free electricity because they have their own power plant that's run off the Hudson River. They produce heat, electricity, and air conditioning. So, and that costs the residents there no money. Why has that not even been considered an avenue of escape for electricity when you have the Hudson River running all the way down one side of Manhattan, and then you have the Atlantic Ocean on one side of Brooklyn? Yeah. Like, why is that not even something that they even entertain?
Would anybody like to answer that?
Well, I think one thing I would say about dams and hydroelectric power is there are a lot of environmental impacts from dams. So I think like it messes with like fish migration routes. I think there's also a lot of water quality impacts that we could foresee from the Hudson. I do know that there are some wind farm proposals for where in Brooklyn? I want to say like the Rockaway.
Well, yeah, they're off the coast, like off the coast of New York State, between Rockaway and Long Beach and Long Island. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's gonna, I mean, that's like they've started building it, and that was a huge win in 2015 when we beat a massive gas project off the shore called Port Ambrose LNG, and we ran our whole campaign on wind, not LNG, and we're now building the wind. Rhode Island was the first pilot project in the US, and those people are coming down here and building a massive utility scale. So it's supposed to power like 1 million homes when it's at its full capacity.
Not 9 gigawatts.
Yeah.
But I asked about Co-op City because I hear you. That's not a dam. It's a building. It's a building, and it didn't have any real effect on the Hudson River. And it surely didn't affect fishing at City Island. Right. I lived there in Co-op City from 69 to like 82. And it's a win. Like, why is it?
Are you sure that it's renewable energy though? Because what New York University has, like this amazing tour, and they have this brilliant but fossil fuel driven system called cogeneration, where they have two different kinds of what?
I don't think the Co-op City is not cogeneration.
No, it's just water. It's just the power of the water.
Is it tidal? It's tidal.
I don't know what they call it.
That's a good research project for all of us. But
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is like, yes, of course, we could run our entire New York City off renewable generation. We have tons of sun, tons of wind, tons of heat in our earth, tons of heat getting expelled. That was such an amazing point that G made about those big tubes. I feel like I want to make an art project out of that. But of course we can do it. But I remember a few years ago, the Energy Democracy Alliance was trying to fight a bill called this is talk about confusing, the value of distributed energy resources. Who knows what the heck that means? But basically, it was a whole bunch of capitalists that were trying to put a price on the sun, and they couldn't figure out how to put it in these.
You can't sell it.
Right.
They were able to
So
sell
it was,
water.
they were
Yeah.
what their alternative was to make the bill, make the value of sun so complicated that solar developers were stunted to build solar. So of course we can do it, but we just have to fight the bad guys. And the rate cases are one way to do it.
Yeah, because if cars are not, gasoline is going to be over in 2035, you can't have any more, they're not going to make any more gas cars. Con Edison or any electrical company is going to make money off of you charging your vehicle. So if you're going to make the money off of me charging my vehicle, why do I have to still pay you an exorbitant amount of money just to keep my ice cold when you're going to still, you're going to make the money. You don't have to abuse me to make the money.
They want to charge you for every kilowatt hour you use for your car, for your fridge, for your TV, everything. And that's the problem. It's a predatory, protected.
That's the operative word. It's predatory.
Question from Kelly.
Yeah, it's actually, and then, okay, in response to your question, but you go on to something. And so,
I hope they don't kill me after this.
no, so right now, in Coney Island, the largest New York City geothermal energy system is being built. They're building two houses, a new buildings, 453 units. Okay, and as Jean explained, with geothermal or thermal energy networks, you basically transfer it, okay, heat in between the earth, and someone's apartment, or it could be you're using wastewater or keeping the subway, or using the ocean. So Coney Island is right on the ocean. Okay, so this if you want to check it out further, you just look at Coney Island geothermal energy system. You Google that, you'll get it. It's set to open next year. Okay, so it's beginning to happen. These projects are beginning to happen. And as Jean mentioned, the law that was passed in last July, utilities all around the state are required, okay, to at least have at least one pilot project in their territory. This is not part of those pilot, this is already happening. If the global law was passed, but it's an example of what could happen. Okay, so this will be the largest. The second largest, anyone want to guess where it is? St. Patrick's Cathedral. St. Patrick's Cathedral is a geothermal project.
100%.
Yeah.
We always hear that New York City, Manhattan is not conducive to geothermal because of the rock. But it's a visible myth, apparently. That was a good picture, and it's just very isolated areas that have this deep rock. But there's a lot of areas that are very good for geothermal. Especially Brooklyn, Queens.
All of New York State is apparently like an average of 55 degrees Fahrenheit under the ground. So New York State is like this is what I've learned. I don't know everything about geothermal at all. But it's like the perfect state to run a geothermal system. And there's another
question of both. Can somebody scroll down? I mean, up.
Yeah, there was a
There
question
it is.
from
Hold on.
me and Lori.
What is the scope of this rate case? Avni and Lori. And does it touch on programs such as grid modernization or improving low-income energy discount programs? And do you intervene on gas rate cases as well as electricity?
You want to start?
Would you like to?
Sure. I feel like, Lori, I think you can really talk about the scope of this Con Ed rate case. So I'll just address the last couple bits of this question. So I don't know in my memory that my short time working on rate cases that I've seen a ton on low-income energy discount programs, but the commission does actually sometimes rule on these discount programs outside of the rate cases. And there's pros and cons to both of that. Sometimes it's nice to have things in what's called a generic proceeding, which means that it affects all the utilities because it means we can get them all at once. And then there's also some cons there, like utilities have more power because they're operating as joint utilities. So they can really use their negotiating power to band together because they know it's better to all be awful together. So there was actually recently a low-income energy discount program review. It was called the Energy Affordability Proceeding, and PULP, of course, held it down in that room as well. And that was, Ruth, what you were mentioning about the state getting more funding for energy debt relief. That proceeding was to just determine like how those funds are going to get used and
dispersed, yeah.
Who they get dispersed to. And then there were a lot of other important factors that Paul brought in as well. Like, how are we qualifying people? How are we making sure that like our state agencies are talking to each other so that no one's having to income qualify in like 30 different programs? They can do it at one and then, or self-attest, right? Because income qualification is another heinous process that we subject people to. Anyways, that's all to say that there sometimes are decisions made about low-income energy discount programs in rate cases, but not to my memory. So I don't feel like super recently it's been in a Con Ed rate case. Agree intervenes almost not exclusively. I think we have intervened in some electricity rate cases, but we actually are mostly on the gas side. So there have definitely been rate cases where, you know, like Central Hudson will be doing their electric and gas rate case at the same time, and we'll just be intervening on the gas side. So there, and I think a lot of other interveners do that as well. And then Lori, I think it would be great if you can touch on the grid modernization aspect of this question as well when you talk about scope.
Yeah, so it's tricky. I'd say that the rate cases are quite broad. It's like, where is the money going? So that could be staffing. Do they have enough staff? Like when you need them and you call them, do they pick up within 60 seconds? Do they follow these different rules with customer service to the meters themselves? Are they replacing meters? How much do those cost to, you know, their infrastructure and things like leak from pipe? And so it's extremely, extremely broad. We are seeing a lot of things start to get picked out of the rate case, like environmental projects being dealt with in different proceedings, like grid modernization is a very big deal. So they'll sometimes have projects and other proceedings, but the money gets talked about in the rate case. And so it's becoming very difficult, even more so, because it means we have to have our eyes on everything that's happening. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so grateful for the people in this room, because we help each other out. You know, there's not 150 of us. I wish there were. But we can say, hey, what happened in this proceeding? Oh, great. Like, we'll watch it here. And it's becoming very complicated on the state level. But I do think there's hope. And the scope, you know, is something that we kind of work on together and watch.
Nice question.
Yeah.
So, several of you mentioned the fact that we can make cases are concentrating on small, not small, but you know, specific cases, situations like children and so on. What are the chances of having a statewide ban on fossil fuel infrastructure? I mean, we have to have that at some point. So how far in the future is that?
I mean, we banned fracking. Like, I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibilities. But I'll say one thing, like, for example, on the All Electric Buildings Act fight, I mean, we have just, you know, been having to, just saying that we shouldn't put fossil fuel systems in new buildings has been so contentious.
Exactly.
That, you know, I think if we tried to ban fossil fuels at this point, I think we get wrecked by
fossil fuel infrastructure, new fossil fuel infrastructure. I'm not talking fossil fuels. New infrastructure. I mean, why do we need new infrastructure? By 2030, it's all over. So it's over.
The stuff that's gonna last through the stuff that Con Ed wants to put in the ground right now and charge almost $1 billion to us. That stuff that's like going from like 16-inch pipes to 36-inch pipes, and they're being like, oh, we're just replacing leaking pipe. But we know what they're up to. And the thing is like once, you know, 2030 say we're not allowed to build and we're not allowed to have, just say 2040, we're not supposed to have, but it's going to last till 2080 and we're still going to be paying for it.
The ratepayers have to understand that, you know, those ratepayers become,
well, that's why we're doing this
fewer. But I'd say 98% of the people out there who are paying these horrendous bills don't get it. And I don't know what the answer is, but I feel that if you come out and say, let's have a ban on new fossil fuel infrastructure, maybe a light bulb will go off somewhere. Because this is what we're doing, we put billions into these new infrastructures that are stranded assets. And now's the time. We've got 6 years to 2030.
Well, we're doing it. Like all the people that are in this room are actively working on making that happen.
I know.
And
we're 0.1%, and we have this tremendous opposition. I mean, these billionaires from API and whatever were putting into this little, I shouldn't say piddly little, you know, electric houses, hookups, and they're putting billions, you know, millions of dollars into killing that bill.
well, at least we know that they're scared. It feels good to scare them.
I know, but you know,
I've got another question here from somebody on Zoom. Last month, one of their roommates received a Con Ed bill of about $3,000 because Con Ed apparently didn't correctly estimate the previous monthly cost. It's a huge dent in our savings and we've been struggling. Apparently they're coming this week to reread the meter. I know my roommate has submitted a complaint to the FCC because the meters are their smart meter. It has complained several times to Con Ed. Is anyone going through the same thing? Has anybody had that experience of these incredibly high bills?
I've heard.
Yeah, it's happened in upstate.
I've heard.
Yeah. And I wrote Carolyn back with some more specifics, but Con Ed is also going through its entire service territory, putting in smart meters.
Yes.
And so what's been happening is if you had an old meter and maybe it's falling behind, when they start to die, they either slow down or they speed up. And so when they install the smart meter, they get a new read and they can go back in time and correct your bill. The law limits the amount of time they can correct to 12 months. And we've had people call and we go through this process. We have the meter tested. Andrew's worked with people and the company is trying to go past 12 months. We'll go 2, 3, 4 years. So you do have rights. We'll make sure that everyone has our hotline number, but you can also file a complaint with the Department of Public Service. And I have that hotline number and maybe someone can help me put it in the chat, but you should file a complaint because you have the right to have your meter tested, an explanation given. And if for some reason you do owe, which unfortunately sometimes happens, you have the right to a payment agreement. There's no way. I mean, $3,000, like right now, like people can't do that. So that hotline number, if you need to file a complaint with the state, is 800-342-3377. And I emailed the individual with that number, but it's 800-342-3377.
There was a question over here.
Yeah, I have a question. You were talking about submitting public comments to for the rate cases. I guess I'm just wondering like what the process is with that, and then also just the general like how to support everything. Like I know you mentioned like calling our representatives about those bills every time. there's so many public comments there.
Yeah, we'll answer the first
We have
part of
an
that.
easy comment prompt on, we have it up on the Sane Energy website, saneenergy.org/utilities, and there's just a button you push, and then you go right to a comment prompt. And we have it set up so it gives you, like, you put in your name, and it gives you the points that you can just copy and paste if you want, or you could, what we ask people to do, and it says this all on the comment prompt, that you can read these points into your own story. It's really important that, you know, the DPS, like the administrative law judges who are looking at the cases, they actually read the comments. And so it's best to have like very personalized stories on the comments. And we have that comment prompt I told you about on the same website. It'll go directly to the public docket. It goes right to the decision makers. Like we don't collect them and then send them in, and like, you know, your comment will go directly to them. So thanks. Yeah, you could just go right to our website. I can pull it up on the screen if folks are interested in seeing it. And you can also make a comment here tonight on the laptops too.
And one last question. You have a question?
Oh yeah, it was more of a comment because I wanted to talk about, well, I just want to say hi to the people on Zoom as well. So hi everyone, my name is Carolyn. I'm an organizer out in Queens with the PSL Party for Socialism and Liberation. We do a lot of grassroots outreach, and we work on a ton of different issues across the city and the country: police brutality, women's and LGBTQ rights, inflation, living of cost crisis, housing, pretty much anything that faces the working class. And, you know, Con Edison, this rate hike, we've identified it as one of the ways that our cost of living is spiraling out of control. And so that's kind of what we've been going to the street corners in our communities. We've been doing outreach in Queens in subway stations, Woodside, in front of public housing, in Long Island City, in front of Queensbridge and Ravenswood last night. We were just there. And we've been building up actually a public forum, a community forum. So we run to the back of a cafe for this Saturday at 6 p.m. It's right off the Steinway station. We've been meeting people on the streets. We've been getting people to direct people to this public comment. So it's great to know that there's some easy prompts, because it's a very highly technical thing to even make a comment. So appreciate that. But we want to actually take the commenting to a new level. At this forum, we want to create even a broader outreach apparatus among the people that we meet, the people who come through the forum, and for the next few weeks before June 1st, which is when the rate case is wrapped up, I believe, or when they have to make a call on one of the yes, no, or modify decisions, right? We want to make sure that there's, as many public comments as possible. And we want to build people who don't, come across websites about, climate campaigns and such. We want to meet our people where they're at, and connect it to the source of inflation, which is really price gouging. It's really corporate greed across the board, right? When we talk to people, it's not just utilities, it's food, it's transportation, it's housing, everything, right? So we hope that you can make it to this Saturday's forum, but if not, stay in touch with me. I don't know if I can leave my contact, but we do want to be doing outreach on the streets. We plan to have commenting tables, actually. I think it's nice for people to have a human face to, not feel alone in battling this rate case. So thank you all. And I learned so much tonight. Thank you so much.
Can you, what's happening with the rally on the 29th?
Yes. Go. Oh. Okay, so everybody show up. Union Square, South Steps. Right above us is the climate clock on that big building. We're working with the team that's behind the climate clock, so they're going to collaborate with us on this, and we have some amazing photographers showing up in art. If you guys registered for this event, I'll make sure to stay in touch with you when the art build is. It's probably going to be sometime next week. We're going to print a banner and make some awesome stuff together. But we're trying to get as many families and, bring your dogs, just be a regular person. We want to get a massive photo shoot. We'll bring a ladder for the photographer to get up on and take a picture facing down of all of us that we say no to Con Ed's rate hike. We don't want to give them 1 penny. And so we're going to print those photos out and deliver it to our buddy Tim Colley from the Con Ed.
That's kind of scary.
And the governor and the public service commissioners. Yeah, and I'm really excited about it. So definitely all it is show up at 3 p.m. Southwest corner of Union Square, April 29th, next Saturday. And be prepared to say cheese for the camera. We'll have some chants and have some speakers. Pardon?
Oh, just that you can register at this link that's on the flyer. And
we have way more flyers. Please take some and give them to your friends.
So this is neither here nor there, but Carolyn, could we ask you also to promote the rally potentially?
Yeah, we could definitely plug that.
Yeah. If you guys want to be co-sponsors, let us know.
Seems like a natural collaboration.
Yeah, of course.
Let me know if you want to be co-sponsors too.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
All right, I think that means that we're gonna close out this amazing teach-in. I think I learned a lot, even though I work in the spaces every day. And I especially learned a lot from everyone in this room and our amazing community advocates and people on the ground that are here to talk about stopping rate hikes and getting fossil fuels out of our utilities and overall making sure we're in a healthier planet and a healthier environment for everyone who lives in our communities. So again, thank you to everyone who joined us on the Zoom. You asked amazing questions. If you need to reach any of the advocates in the room, all of our information will be available. If you are also struggling with your utility debt, we have the amazing people at Polk who are there to help you. And we are going to be continuing with your help to fight for clean air, lower utility bills, and overall a just energy system in New York State. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your night.